Hi guys, welcome back to CRYPTID'S Den. Some days, all we needed is a quiet place to land, and I'm grateful you've chosen this one. Life moves fast, but moments like these remind us to pause, to listen, and to feel. Let me know where you're watching from, if you feel like sharing. And if you haven't yet, go ahead and subscribe, or leave a comment. I'm always here, and I'm always listening. Now, let's get into it. I know what you're thinking. Those old bedtime stories our parents told us. Just fairy tales. I used to think so too. Until the summer of 1982 when I saw her, and she saw me. It started the first night in the Bitterroot Mountains. My sister Lucy and I had just lost our mother. Margot, our stepmother, took us to a cabin deep in the forest. I couldn't sleep. There was something watching. A massive shadow at the tree line. A foggy handprint on the window. Not human, but not wild either. 3 days later, we found her, wounded, breathing shallow beneath a fern-covered arch. Huge, ancient. She didn't run. She didn't growl. She looked at me and blinked, gently, like she knew pain, like she wanted to be understood. We cared for her with apples, warm cloths, water. She began mimicking us, tilting her head like Lucy, washing her wound like Margot. She wasn't just healing, she was learning. Then one night, a howl echoed through the woods. Not hers. Something else. Something darker. She ran. The next morning, we found claw marks, too sharp to be hers. And we knew she wasn't alone in those woods. Something had taken her child, and now it was watching us. She disappeared a week later. No tracks, no sound. Just a folded handkerchief Margot had dropped, and a stone carving of a hand beneath our favorite tree. The photo I took still haunts me. Her, bowing her head, while I placed my hand over my heart. The way she did. On the back, I wrote one sentence. The ones we call monsters. Sometimes love the hardest. If you're ready to hear what really happened that summer, keep watching. Some people dream of monsters under their bed. We had one watching from the tree line. I remember the hum of the truck tires on gravel that day. The way the Bitterroot air wrapped around us. Thin, sharp, pine-soaked. Margot had one hand on the wheel, her fingers tapping to some old Fleetwood Mac tune she liked to hum, but never sing. Lucy and I sat in the back, silent, 12 years old. Twin girls packed into the shell of what used to be a family. After Mom died, that cabin became the one place no one expected anything of us. No casseroles, no apologies, just sky and trees and space to not be okay. The cabin hadn't changed much. Same crooked porch. Same creaky screen door that never quite latched. The kitchen window still overlooked the little clearing where wild thimbleberries grew, and the rusted wood stove still smoked up the place like a campfire. It was late June, but the mornings up here always bit your nose. That first night, I couldn't sleep. I told myself it was the altitude, or the quiet, or maybe the weight of Mom's ghost still sitting in the walls. Lucy had passed out cold, her hand still clutching the edge of her sketchbook, but I lay awake, listening. The kind of listening where your heart tries to fill in the silence. And then I saw it. Not sound, not a branch cracking, just a presence, sitting by the tree line, not 20 yards from the cabin. Too big to be a bear, too still to be anything else. The moonlight caught the shape just enough, shoulders like a boulder, fur that moved a little in the breeze, and eyes. God, those eyes. Glowing faint amber, not like an animal's reflection, like something lit from inside. It didn't move, it didn't growl. It just sat there, watching the warm orange light from our kitchen window. I didn't scream. I don't know why. I just kept watching back, By morning, it was gone. But the glass on the kitchen window was different. I was the first one up, padding in with bare feet and rubbing the sleep from my eyes. At first, I thought it was just condensation, a patch of fog on the window from the cold night. But then I looked closer. It was a handprint. A full, 5-fingered handprint, bigger than any man's, smeared a little at the tips like whoever left it had leaned in. The fingers stretched nearly to the top of the window, which would have put the person, no, the thing, at least 8 feet tall. I stood there staring at it until Margot came in holding her mug and stopped cold. She didn't say anything at first, just looked at the print, then out toward the trees. She took a long sip of coffee and finally muttered, "Maybe just a trick of the dew." But I could see it in her eyes. That wasn't dew, and we both knew it. Lucy didn't believe me, of course. She said it was probably just some neighbor kid messing around or a smudge we never noticed. But she didn't look me in the eye when she said it. Later that day, I snuck out with a flashlight and went down to the edge of the woods. The ground was too dry for tracks. But something told me it had been there, not just last night. The truth is, it wasn't the first time I'd felt it. That presence. Last summer, I used to leave a little bowl of water outside the shed. I told Margot it was for a stray cat I thought I saw once. But the truth was, I never saw it. Not really. Just heard something walking past late at night. Soft, heavy, careful. One morning the bowl was tipped over, and I found a gray hair. Coarse, like wire. Caught in the porch rail. Back then, I thought maybe I'd imagined it. A kid's fantasy. But now there was a hand on the glass. Margot didn't talk about it again, but she checked the locks twice before bed that night. And she made sure to draw the curtains tight. Lucy pretended she didn't notice. She stayed up late, sketching under the lamp, headphones in. But I could tell. She was drawing it, trying to remember what I'd described, even if she didn't believe me. That second night, I didn't see anything. But the feeling stayed. Like something had changed in the woods. Like they weren't just woods anymore. They were holding something, watching, waiting. The next morning, the handprint was gone. But I traced its outline on the fogged-up window anyway. I pressed my own palm against the spot. Mine barely reached the center. I didn't feel afraid. Not really. What I felt was, I don't know. Pity. It hadn't tried to get in. It didn't break anything. It didn't even hide. It just wanted to see. There was a loneliness to it. Something familiar. The way someone might stand outside a party they weren't invited to just to hear the laughter through the glass. I'd felt that way since Mom died, watching the world go on without me, wondering if I still belonged in it. That was the first time I felt it. Not fear, but something closer to recognition. And once you feel that, once you let yourself believe that the thing in the woods might not be a monster at all, you start to wonder what else we've gotten wrong. The days that followed were quiet, uneasy, but calm. We went hiking. Lucy made crowns out of wildflowers. Margot read on the porch with her coffee and her silence. But I kept looking, out the windows, toward the trees, waiting, because I knew now we weren't alone, and maybe we never had been. But back then, we still thought this was our story. Our quiet summer in the woods. Our way back to something we'd lost. We didn't know yet that something else had been here long before us. Watching. Listening. And bleeding. The second week always felt different. That was when the quiet stopped feeling like peace and started sounding like it was hiding something. Lucy had this habit of wandering. Not reckless wandering. Just the kind of slow, thoughtful drift she did when her head was full of drawings she hadn't sketched yet. That afternoon, we were playing some version of hide and seek between the quaking aspens up behind the cabin, where the moss turned the ground soft and the air smelled like rain even when it hadn't. I was counting by the stump, eyes closed, voice echoing between trees. When I reached 50, I called out. But she didn't answer. She always answered. I found her a few minutes later, crouched near a patch of bracken fern, staring at the ground. Her fingers hovered just above the soil, not touching. I saw the look in her eyes before I saw what she was looking at. The kind of stillness that doesn't come from fear, but from not knowing yet how to feel. It was blood, dry, brown-edged, soaking into the leaves. Not fresh, but not old either. A trail of it, like something had limped through days ago, maybe less. Not a straight path, more like a spiral. I looked around, scanning for bones or fur, or any sign of a kill site. But there was no carcass, no predator signs, just blood. And it kept going. Lucy didn't say anything. She just looked at me, waiting to see if I'd say we should turn back. But I didn't. I couldn't. Something was pulling me. Not out of bravery. Out of something else. A feeling I hadn't named yet. We followed the trail, stepping slow, quiet. It led to a narrow path between two leaning pines, where the rocks looked clawed apart. There was a hollow up ahead, shaded by a low ridge of moss-covered stone that curved inward like a mouth. Ferns draped down over the entrance, and the light there was dimmer, more green. The kind of place you'd expect to find bones, or secrets. Lucy stopped at the edge. I ducked under the ferns and stepped in first. At first I thought it was a tree, a wind-fallen stump, thick with moss and mud. But then it moved, just barely. A chest, rising and falling in slow, ragged pulls. Breath. The shape was enormous, hunched in on itself, half curled like something in pain. Gray fur, matted and streaked with old blood. One arm tucked under, the other curled across its middle like it was shielding something. Its back rose like a boulder, but its head was low, turned sideways, eyes half open, not glowing this time, just open. Watching. Lucy stepped beside me and gasped, but not loudly. Not the kind of gasp you make when you're scared, more like when something hurts for someone else. I felt it too, a tightness in my chest, like something ancient and sad had just passed through us. The creature didn't move, didn't growl, didn't bare teeth. It didn't try to crawl away or raise a hand. It just looked at us, like it saw us, not as a threat, but something else. I don't know how long we stood there. Maybe seconds, maybe more. The air was thick and every insect had gone silent. The only sound was the slow, pained rasp of its breath. Then it blinked. Once. It didn't look like a threat. It looked abandoned. There was something near its side. I bent down slowly and saw a deep tear just above its hip. The fur had parted around it, revealing bruised, raw skin beneath, crusted blood. And next to it, half buried in the dirt, was a tooth. A canine, sharp and yellow, too large to be human, but smaller than what you'd expect from this thing's mouth. It looked cracked, like it had been torn out violently. I picked it up. It was still damp. Lucy whispered, "Is that a wolf tooth?" I didn't answer. I didn't know. I wanted to run. But more than that, I wanted to help. Even though nothing about this made sense, even though we were just two kids standing in front of something that shouldn't have existed, we backed out slowly, careful not to turn our backs, careful not to make noise. The eyes followed us, but the body stayed still. I don't know why I expected it to vanish when we looked away, but it didn't. It just stayed there, hurt, breathing. Waiting. By the time we got back to the cabin, the sun had dipped behind the ridge and the chill was setting in. Margot was inside, heating up soup, humming again. We didn't speak right away. I just sat on the porch and held that tooth in my hand, turning it over and over, feeling the point dig into my palm. Not enough to break skin, just enough to remind me this wasn't a dream. Lucy finally said, Do you think it's the one from the window? I looked out at the trees again. Thought about the way those eyes didn't flinch, the way it didn't growl, the way it didn't look at us with hunger, but with something else. Something raw. Wounded. I nodded. We didn't know yet what it was. Not really. We didn't know why it was hurt, or how long it had been hiding out there. But one thing was clear. We hadn't just found something. We'd stumbled into something already happening. And the part that stayed with me, the part that made my chest feel like it was caving in that night as I lay awake, wasn't the fear. It was the way it looked at me, like it hoped I might come back. We didn't tell Margot everything right away. Not because we didn't trust her. We did. But there was something sacred about what we'd seen, like saying it out loud too soon would break it. Still, we couldn't leave it alone. The next morning, before the sun was all the way up, Lucy and I slipped out again. We packed a thermos of warm water and a towel. I stole some gauze from Margot's old med kit, the one she always kept under the bathroom sink in case one of us broke something while climbing trees. She never said it, but I knew that kit meant more to her than just Band-Aids. It was who she used to be, before she married Dad, before she inherited us. We followed the same trail, stepping where Wood stepped before, brushing back the ferns like pages of a book we weren't sure we were supposed to read. And when we got there, she was still there. Still curled up. Still breathing heavy, but she'd shifted a little. As if she'd tried to move in the night and didn't get far. The wound looked worse in the daylight, deep and red at the center, dark yellow around the edges. Infected, maybe. I didn't know. I wasn't a nurse. I was just a kid with a gut feeling that something was wrong. And she looked at us again, like she remembered, like she'd been waiting. That was the moment we told Margot. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't panic. She just stared at the tooth Lucy placed on the table. The cracked edge. The dried blood. Her lips pressed into a line so thin I could barely see them. Then she turned, opened the cupboard, and pulled out a jar of wildflower honey, a bottle of diluted iodine, and a bag of fresh raspberries she'd picked the day before. No lecture, no sighs, just action. We led her back that afternoon, all three of us carrying what we could. Margot moved slower than usual, focused. The way I'd seen her move once when Lucy sliced her thigh on our rusty fence post, the summer I turned 9, like she'd gone somewhere inside herself. Somewhere trained. When we reached the hollow, the creature didn't flinch. Margot crouched a few feet away. Looked her over, said nothing at first. Then, softly, as if to the air itself, she said, "This isn't just a hurt animal. This is someone." She laid down the food first, a handful of raspberries, a small roll of dry bread, a bottle of clean water. She didn't offer it directly, just placed it gently near the edge of the moss. Then she sat back, cross-legged, open palms, and waited. The Bigfoot. Because there was no more pretending it was anything else, watched us, her breathing shallow. But her eyes, they were steady. She didn't growl, didn't snarl. After a long moment, she reached, slow and deliberate, and took the water. She didn't guzzle it. She sipped. Then, God help me, she nudged it back toward Margot. Not all the way, just enough. Margot blinked. Her mouth moved like she wanted to say something, but didn't. She just smiled, small and sad. That night, Margot didn't sleep. She stayed up reading, searching through an old wilderness medicine manual she kept in the drawer by the fireplace. I saw her make notes, draw diagrams, jot ingredients. She whispered to herself. Rehearsed plans. The next morning, she woke us early. We boiled water, gathered wild yarrow, crushed willow bark. She showed us how to mix a poultice, not for curing, she made that clear, but for helping. You don't fix something like this, she said. You help it fix itself. We visited every day after that. Margot never touched the creature without letting her see her hands first. She spoke softly, never made sudden moves. She cleaned the wound with warm water, dabbed the edges with the tincture, and wrapped it with clean gauze. Each time, the creature tensed, just slightly, then settled. And she learned. By the end of the week, she no longer flinched when we approached. She no longer just endured the treatment. She welcomed it. There were days she leaned into Margot's touch, her giant, battered body shifting gently forward, like it gave her relief just to be acknowledged. Lucy brought her drawings, sat on the rock nearby and sketched with her knees tucked up, narrating what she saw. Moss, bugs, sunlight patterns. The creature watched, curious, like a child learning language by sound alone. One day I saw her mimic Margot. Not perfectly, but enough, Margot had said. "It's okay," and pressed her hand lightly to her own chest, and the Bigfoot copied her, slow, gentle, like the gesture had meaning. That changed something in Margot. One night she came in after the visit and leaned against the kitchen counter, hands trembling just enough to spill her tea. I asked her if she was okay. She looked at me, eyes wet, and whispered, "There's more kindness in her silence than in half the men I've met." She wasn't joking. There was no trace of savagery in the creature's eyes, no threat, no instinct to dominate. What she had was weariness, deep, carved-in exhaustion, and patience, a kind of waiting I didn't understand yet. But Margot saw it. She always had a way of seeing what people didn't say, what they held in, and it wasn't just the wound she was tending anymore. It was the weight behind the wound, the story that had no words. A few days later, Lucy and I found something just beyond the hollow. Metal glinting between ferns, a steel jaw trap, old, rusted, but brutal. Teeth still sharp. There were others, some half-buried, some fresh. They weren't for deer. They were placed high, angled wrong, set to catch something, walking upright. Margot inspected the marks on the tree nearby, narrow slits, perfectly spaced. Someone had hunted her, and maybe still was, but that didn't change what Margot did. She kept showing up, kept cleaning, feeding, whispering things I couldn't always hear. The Bigfoot never left the hollow. Not yet. But she started to sit up more, eat more. Her strength returned, little by little. We watched her reclaim herself in slow motion, and every time we left, she watched us go with those amber eyes. Not desperate, not pleading, just holding on to something. Maybe hope, maybe memory. Maybe the only ounce of mercy she'd been given in years. The days bled together after that. We stopped thinking of her as a creature. We didn't call her Bigfoot anymore, not even between ourselves. Lucy just called her her, and I followed suit. It felt more honest, more human. Margot brought food every morning. Hard-boiled eggs, mashed berries, sometimes bits of salmon we traded for in town. She'd sit a few feet away on her folded jacket, gently unwrap the bandage, clean the wound, redress it, and never force contact. And she never resisted. She let Margot touch her, let her work. The trust came slowly, in pieces, like a song we were learning by ear. I noticed first that she'd begun to sit up more. Her spine wasn't curled as tight. Her arms were no longer shielding her belly. She still moved slow, but there was intention now. Control. And she'd started mimicking us. Just little things at first. The way Lucy tucked her knees in when she sat on a rock nearby. The way Margot nodded after saying, "All done." The way I wrinkled my nose when I smelled that nasty herb Margot used for the poultice. One afternoon, she wrinkled hers back at me, and for a second it felt like she was smiling. Not a grin, not the way people do it, but something shifted in her face. Something gentle. We brought her things to pass time. Smooth stones from the creek, a strand of woven grass. Once, Lucy folded an origami bird from a candy wrapper and set it down, unsure what to expect. The next morning, the wrapper had been unfolded and rewrapped. Crumpled, but purposeful, placed neatly beside a pile of polished acorns. I don't know what any of it meant. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. She wasn't learning like an animal. She was remembering. That was the part that haunted me. The sense that she hadn't always been like this, that she'd seen something like us before, and not just feared it, known it. Once. She moved with the care of someone relearning what it meant to be seen, as if she had once held love in her hands and had it taken, as if she was afraid the same thing might happen again. And maybe it would. We couldn't promise it wouldn't. Margot started calling her the Elder, not out loud, but in the quiet spaces. When she'd whispered to herself while making the poultice, "The Elder's doing better today. The Elder took the berries gently this time." There was a reverence in her voice, like this wasn't just a being. It was someone ancient, someone who'd seen more winters than Wan's seen birthdays. She had scars we hadn't noticed before. Not just the wound on her side, older ones. Long, silvery grooves across her forearms, a patch of fur missing on her shoulder, revealing dark skin beneath. Weathered, thick, more leather than flesh. Her fingers were cracked, knuckles gnarled. But she moved with dignity. Even in stillness, she had presence. One afternoon after the rain let up, Margot and Lucy stayed behind to clean the cabin. I went alone. The air was thick, pine-soaked, with fog curling between the roots like breath. I brought a jar of peanut butter and some plantain leaves Margot had dried. When I stepped into the hollow, she wasn't in her usual place. My heart dropped. I called out once, not loud, just enough to say, "I'm here." And then she stepped from behind the ridge. She was standing, fully. Still a little hunched, still leaning, but up. Taller than I thought, broader. The ground shook a little when she moved, but it wasn't threatening. It was like the earth was making room for her again. She looked at me. I looked at her. I placed the jar on the moss, stepped back. She sat down slowly, one knee bent, the way Margot always did, palms on her thighs. She mimicked it exactly. I sat too. For a while, we just sat. The forest had gone still. No birds, no wind, just the slow hum of something old settling into something new. And then, for the first time, she reached toward me. Not to grab, just to mirror. Her hand hovered near her chest, fingers spread. She touched just above her heart. I did the same. It wasn't a greeting. It was memory. Later that night, after I told Margot, she lit a candle and didn't speak for a long time. Just stared at the flame. When she finally said something, it was so quiet I almost missed it. She's not just recovering. She's remembering. That evening, we left an apple slice and a soft scarf by the edge of the ridge. It was Margot's idea. Not as a gift, as a comfort. At dawn, they were both gone. But in their place, neatly folded into a leaf bundle, was a sprig of wild blueberry branches, peeled back, exposing the pale wood inside, tied with a strand of dried moss. It felt like a thank you, or a story, or both. We didn't know what she'd been through. Not yet. But the forest had started to shift. Like it was preparing for something. Like it could sense what was coming. That night, I sat on the porch alone, wrapped in a quilt, watching the tree line. The fog was low. The moon was dim behind clouds. And I thought about how strange it is that sometimes the ones who've suffered most carry their pain the quietest. And sometimes all they need is to not be alone with it. There are some sounds that don't belong to any place. You hear them once, and you just know they're wrong. Not because they're loud or strange, but because they don't carry anything familiar. No shape, no memory. Just that cold weight that makes your spine lock up and your blood run still. We heard one of those sounds the night everything changed. It had rained all day, that kind of soaking mountain rain that feels like it's washing the whole forest into something new. The trees outside the cabin dripped steady, like clocks counting down to something we couldn't see yet. We'd spent most of the afternoon inside. We'd spent most of the afternoon inside. Lucy was curled on the floor drawing again. Margot had gone quiet, lost in the storm or her own thoughts. I don't even remember what I was doing when it happened. I just remember the sound. It started low, deep, too long to be wind, too hollow to be thunder. Then it rose, a howl. No, not just a howl. Something cracked open inside it, like grief with teeth. And the moment we heard it, she heard it too. We hadn't seen her in 2 days. We'd left offerings, left warmth, left space. But she hadn't come. Not to the edge of the ridge, not to the hollow. We figured she was just resting, healing, hiding. We were wrong. That night, as that howl cut through the trees, we heard movement outside the cabin. Heavy, wet, urgent. I ran to the window, and there she was, standing again, not leaning this time, her frame rising like shadow against the tree line, arms tense, breath fast. Her fur soaked, matted to her skin. She wasn't just listening, she was remembering. And then she ran, limping, yes, but fast. Faster than we thought she could move. She disappeared into the dark, vanishing between the pines, as if the trees knew her name. We grabbed raincoats and flashlights and followed. We didn't speak. Margot led the way, one hand up to block branches, the other gripping a flashlight tight enough to crack it. The trail was mud, slick, almost erased by the downpour. But every few feet, we saw her prints, deep, determined, and not alone. There were other prints, larger, wider at the toe, narrower at the heel. And the claws, God. The claw marks sank straight into the soil, like knives. 3 toes, splayed. No drag, no hesitation, not bare, not hers. We kept going until we reached the hollow, but she wasn't there. Only the moss, torn up in patches, the ferns crushed flat. The scent of something metallic in the air, copper and wet earth. Margot swept the flashlight across the ridge and found the tree. One tree, bark shredded, 5 deep gashes carved downward, clean and long, like from a curved blade, or talons. We'd seen claw marks before. Black bears had torn up the old trash bins at the ranger station once. But this wasn't that. This wasn't scavenging. This was a warning, or a challenge. Lucy stood frozen beside me. Her voice barely came out when she asked, "Is it still here?" And Margot, steady as ever, just whispered, "No," but it was. We didn't stay long. The silence around us felt pressurized, like the woods were holding their breath. Even the frogs had gone still. The only sound was the drip of rain from the leaves, and our own footsteps sloshing back toward the cabin. That night, none of us slept. I sat by the window until dawn, scanning the edge of the trees, half hoping she'd return, half hoping she wouldn't. There was something different about the way she moved, about the way she reacted to that sound. She wasn't just afraid, she knew it. Whatever had called out, it wasn't a stranger. It was a memory, a nightmare returning in flesh. And we'd brought her out of hiding. The next morning, we went back. The air still felt off, like the woods were bruised. The prints were still there, sunk deeper now with the rain. The strange 3-toed ones veered away from the hollow, heading west, toward the deeper valley. Hers doubled back, not far, just a few yards, to the edge of the clearing. That's where we found the moss pressed down, the faintest imprint of her knees, and something else. She left behind one of the polished stones we gave her, set carefully in the center of a patch of bare earth. It gleamed faintly, almost silver in the light. Margot crouched, picked it up, turned it in her hand. She didn't say anything. I knew what it meant. She didn't want us following. She didn't want us near whatever was coming. That was the first time I cried, really cried, not for her pain, but because I realized we hadn't protected her. We'd offered comfort, maybe even love, but never safety. And now she was walking into danger alone. We'd tried to help, but we'd never asked if she was running from something. It was the hat I noticed first. Bright yellow, with a bent brim and a dark sweat line across the back, perched on the porch railing like it had been waiting there for years. The kind of hat old trail workers wear until it becomes part of their skin. Except no one lived near us, not for miles. We hadn't heard a car, hadn't seen footprints leading up the path, and yet there it was, dry, sitting like it belonged. Margot saw it too. She froze in the doorway, one hand on the coffee mug, the other slightly trembling where it hung by her side. Lucy stood behind her, silent, her eyes already scanning the trees for whatever, or whoever, had left it. Then the man stepped out. Not from the road, from the woods. He wasn't big, but he was broad-shouldered, sun-browned, with hands that looked like they remembered cold steel and hard winters. He had a gray beard and tired eyes, and a voice that scraped like gravel when he finally spoke. "Didn't mean to startle you. Name's Rhett." He looked like he hadn't shaved in a month, hadn't slept in 2, but he didn't seem crazy. Just old, cautious, like someone who knew things and wasn't sure if he should say them. Margot stayed on the porch, didn't wave, didn't smile, just nodded. "You're a long way from anywhere?" she said flatly. "A long way from anywhere," she said flat. He rubbed the back of his neck, glancing toward the tree line. "But something's been circling out here. I figured someone ought to say something." Lucy and I didn't move. I was standing half behind the screen door, my heart thumping harder than it should have. But it wasn't fear, not quite. It was the sense that someone else finally knew, that this wasn't in our heads. "You seen tracks?" Red asked. "Three-toed ones?" Margot didn't answer right away. Instead, she stepped down off the porch, slowly, deliberately. She handed him the mug. He sipped without asking. Winced like the coffee was too bitter, or maybe not bitter enough. Then he said it. "I saw her, few years back, big, moved like a shadow. I was higher up the ridge, checking runoff damage. She had a little one with her then, kept it close. Always between her and me." That word hit harder than I expected. Had. He looked at us, at me. "I take it she's come back," he said. Margot didn't nod, didn't blink, but something in her posture changed, just enough to let him keep going. "There's a stretch of trail west of here, old lumber cut. Most folks avoid it. Locals say it's bad luck. I say it's something worse. I found bones there once. Something small, something that never should been left like that. Fur too, gray, curled around the bones like it tried to shield them." Lucy stepped closer to me. I could feel her fingers brush mine, quick and wordless. "She is not just out there healing," Rhett went on. "She's grieving." He said it like it was the simplest truth in the world. And I believed him. I remembered the way she touched her chest, the way she watched us leave, day after day, the offerings she returned, the careful silences. Grief can do that. Make you quieter, make you kinder. Or it can twist you. "I think something's following her," I said. My voice surprised even me. It sounded smaller than I meant it to. Rhett nodded once. Not something. He stepped off the porch, walked a few paces toward the clearing, and looked back. "There's things in these woods that don't belong. You know that already. We didn't stop him from leaving. He didn't ask to stay. He just left the hat. We didn't see her again for 4 more days. Not a sign, not a sound. But every morning, Margot still packed a basket. Still made the same poultice. Still wrapped it in linen and tied it with twine. She didn't say where she was going when she slipped out, but we all knew. On the 5th day, she didn't come back with the basket. She came back with a single broken pine cone, stripped of its seeds and wrapped in leaves. "From her?" I asked. Margot just nodded. Her lips were pressed tight, eyes red like she hadn't blinked for a long while. "She's thinner," she whispered. "She's not eating." I didn't know what to say. Lucy finally whispered, "Do you think she's giving up?" No one answered, but I kept thinking about that little one Rhett mentioned. that no one ever talked about again, and how grief doesn't always cry. Sometimes it just stops. The next night, I couldn't sleep. I slipped out of bed, grabbed a blanket, and went to the porch. The woods were quiet again. Too quiet. That's when I saw it. Up by the same ridge where she once stood, something moved. Not fast, not big, but upright. Watching, it wasn't her. It was taller. Thinner. The shape didn't crouch or shift. Just stood there, outlined faintly by the moonlight. I couldn't see the face, but I could feel the weight of it, like it didn't breathe, like it didn't need to, and then it was gone. Like mist folding into darkness. I sat there till morning, staring at that spot. And when the sun came up, I realized something I hadn't before. She hadn't been healing. She'd been hiding, and the thing she was hiding from had finally found her. The rain didn't stop for 3 days straight. Not the kind that soaks and leaves, but the slow, steady kind that seeps into everything. The cabin felt smaller when it rained like that. The windows fogged up. The air smelled like wet bark and boiled tea. And none of us said what we were all thinking. She was gone. There hadn't been a footprint. No crushed ferns. No quiet tapping on the porch at dawn. Margot still packed the basket anyway. She left it at the same place. Every morning. Just past the ridge. A folded cloth. A slice of bread. A sprig of mint tucked in beside it like a note. But nothing came back. Not even a broken shell. Not even a stone. On the 4th morning, the rain stopped. The woods felt hollow in the silence. Birds returned, but only a few, and they didn't sing. Lucy walked slower than usual. Her boots dragged in the dirt, not because she was tired, but because she didn't want to know what we'd find. We reached the hollow before noon. It looked different. Not broken, not violent, just still. The moss had started to regrow over the damp patch where her body used to lie. The ferns were no longer pressed down. Even the smell had changed. No more wet fur, no more sweet rot of bruised berries. Just pine, just stone. But she had left something behind. Right in the middle of the clearing, where the moss was driest, sat a small pile. At first I thought it was just forest debris, but Margot crouched, touched it, and I saw her fingers shake in a way I hadn't seen since the funeral. She slowly unwrapped the bundle, and inside, layered in dry leaves and bound with twisted grass, was a dried honeycomb. Whole, still golden in places, wrapped carefully in thistle petals. Next to it, laid flat, was a patch of moss tied tight like a parcel. Inside was the scarf Margot had lost 2 weeks earlier, folded so delicately you'd think it had been ironed. And beside it all, facing us, were 2 things. A smooth stone, hand-shaped, not carved, just worn, but unmistakable. 5 stubs, a palm, placed gently into the dirt like a farewell, and beside it, etched faintly into the bark of a fallen log, deep enough to catch shadow, but not to damage the wood, were claw marks, 4 of them, vertical, clean, long, not hers, and they stopped halfway across the log. They didn't break through, didn't tear into anything, just ended, like whatever made them got close, but didn't follow. Margot didn't speak for a long time. She just stayed kneeling there, her hand resting on the scarf like it still held warmth. I looked over at Lucy, and she was crying silently. No sound. Just that kind of deep, aching grief that lies behind the ribs. And me, I just stood because something in my chest was torn open, not just because she left, but because she didn't run away. She stepped back. She chose distance, not out of fear, but out of protection. We thought we were helping her heal, but maybe all along, she was waiting for the right moment to step away. on her own terms. She didn't disappear. She retreated, like a tide pulling back into the ocean, gentle and sure, leaving behind only what she wanted us to hold. A gift, a goodbye, a boundary. Margot whispered something then. I don't know if it was to herself or to us or to the woods, but I remember it, every syllable. She didn't leave because she got better. She left because she loved us too much to stay. The walk back felt longer than usual. Lucy didn't draw that night. I didn't sit on the porch. Margot made tea, but no one drank it. There was a space now, not just in the woods, but in the air around us. A space shaped like her silence, her watching, her presence we'd grown used to, maybe even depended on. And in that space something else began to settle. Understanding. Not the kind that explains everything, but the kind that lets you rest a little easier. Because even though she was gone, we weren't left with nothing. We were left with care, with memory, and a message. A hand-shaped stone, a returned scarf, a honeycomb, and a line that stopped before it reached where we stood. It was my daughter who found the photo. She was digging through one of the old memory boxes we kept in the attic, chasing some last-minute idea for her school project. Something about family roots. Something about summer places that mattered. I'd nearly forgotten we still had those boxes, covered in dust, pushed behind Christmas ornaments and tangled lights. She came downstairs holding it in both hands, like it might fall apart if she blinked too hard. It was an old Polaroid. Edges curled. Colors faded the way all memories seem to fade, just enough to feel unreal. But it wasn't blurry. Not at all. The light hit just right. Probably a morning sunbeam cutting through the trees. You could see the thimbleberry bushes in the background, the ridge rising behind them like a curtain of green. And there we were, me at 12, standing near the edge of the clearing. Arms out just a little, one hand pressed to my chest, and beside me, slightly bent, her massive hand mirroring mine, was something most people would never believe. Her. There was no mistaking it. You could see her eyes, not glowing, not fierce, just open, present, and the way she was looking at me, there was no fear, no threat. Just that quiet, impossible tenderness that still catches in my throat every time I think about her. My daughter stared at the photo longer than I expected. She didn't laugh, didn't ask if it was some Halloween costume or trick of the light. She just looked, and finally said, soft and almost shy, "Is this real?" I didn't answer right away. Not because I doubted, but because I knew the second I said yes, everything would change. The world she thought she knew would open just a little wider, and some things, once you let them in, never fully leave. So I nodded, and I told her the story, all of it. The summer mom sent us up to the cabin with Margot, hoping the quiet would stitch something back together. The first night I saw the shape at the tree line, the window pane and the handprint, the blood in the ferns, the eyes that blinked instead of growled. I told her about the wound, about the honeycomb, about how Margot never hesitated, how Lucy learned to sit still and listen instead of sketching every twitch. I told her how kindness doesn't always come in the shape we expect, how grief can make even the gentlest soul run like something hunted. I told her about Rhett, the yellow cap, the warning, and the thing with claws that never quite crossed the law. And then I told her about the goodbye, the bundle of wild things left like an altar. The way it all felt more sacred than sad, like a prayer wrapped in silence. She didn't interrupt once, and when I was done, she picked up the photo again, on the back, in handwriting I hadn't seen in years. Margot's were the words. The ones we call monsters. Sometimes love the hardest. I don't know why that hit me harder than the picture itself. Maybe because Margot never said things like that out loud. She was all action, all grit. But that one sentence, scrawled in her slanted print, carried everything she never found the words for. She knew. She always knew. The photo lives on our mantel now, right between the pinecone owl Lucy made in 3rd grade and the little brass lamp my husband found at a garage sale and swore was good luck. Most people don't ask about the picture, or if they do, they assume it's a prank. Something staged. I let them think that. But every now and then, someone lingers. Someone leans in. Someone looks too long at those amber eyes in the photograph and feels what I felt that summer. Not fear, not curiosity, but recognition. And every time I walk past that frame, I remember that she didn't ask for anything. Not food, not safety, not even our trust. She just watched. Then she mirrored. And then she gave more of herself than most humans ever do. She wasn't a beast. She was a mother who lost everything. And for one fleeting, fragile summer, we were her only sanctuary. Some stories stay with you not because of how they end, but because of how quietly they change you. This wasn't a tale about monsters. It wasn't about fear or wilderness or things that go bump in the night. It was about the spaces in between, where grief doesn't roar, it echoes. Where kindness doesn't shout, it simply shows up again and again, with bandaged hands and open eyes. Sometimes, what we run from isn't the danger outside, it's the pain that's taken root inside us. And sometimes the most wounded ones are the gentlest. The ones who've seen too much, lost too much, endured in silence while the world told them to vanish, to stay hidden, to become myth. But there's a quiet kind of bravery in staying close to the light. There is dignity in choosing not to harm, even when you have every reason to. There is strength in protecting what you love, even when no one sees it. And there is a sacred beauty in being witnessed, not as a monster, not as a mistake, but as something worthy of grace. Because the truth is, connection isn't made with words alone. It lives in gestures, in the simple act of staying, in a returned scarf, a piece of honeycomb, a gaze that says, I remember what it felt like to be loved, and I want to try again. The world is full of stories we've forgotten how to listen to. Not every forest is haunted, not every shadow wants to harm, and not every silence means emptiness. Sometimes it means presence, witness, mercy, and maybe, just maybe, the things we call monsters are the ones who've held love longer than we ever dared to. So if this story stirred something in you, if it made you pause, made you feel, made you wonder what else lives beyond what we can explain, thank you. Truly. We'd love to hear what stayed with you. What made you think twice? What made you think twice? Leave a comment, share your thoughts, or simply say that you were here, that you listened, that you remembered too. And if you'd like more stories like this, stories that walk the line between mystery and meaning, please consider subscribing to the channel. It helps keep these stories alive. It helps build a place for others who believe, like you do, that the unknown can be beautiful, that the wild can be gentle, that silence can be love in disguise. Thanks for walking this path with us. We'll see you again in the trees.